Evelyn Harper stood at the edge of the dense forest, her eyes fixed on the silhouette of Ashcroft Manor. The mansion loomed like a forgotten sentinel, its darkened windows staring vacantly into the fog-laden woods. Vines crept up its weathered stone walls, and the once grand structure now sagged under the weight of years of neglect. The cold, damp air clung to Evelyn's skin, sending shivers down her spine. She took a deep breath, the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filling her nostrils. It had been years since she last stood here, but the memories were as vivid as the day they were etched into her mind. Her sister Alice had disappeared within these very walls when they were just children. The pain of that loss had driven Evelyn to become a paranormal investigator, each case bringing her closer to answers, but never to closure. Today, she hoped, would be different. Clutching her flashlight and equipment bag, Evelyn began her approach. The forest seemed to close in around her as she moved, the trees whispering secrets she couldn't quite decipher. With each step, the sense of foreboding grew, pressing down on her like an invisible weight. She reached the grand wrought-iron gates, now rusted and half-hinged, and pushed them open with a groan that echoed through the silence. The front yard was overgrown, nature reclaiming what humanity had abandoned. Weeds and wildflowers tangled in a chaotic embrace, and the fountain that once greeted visitors with a serene trickle was now dry, its stone figures worn and moss-covered. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped onto the cracked stone path leading to the front door. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the door's tarnished brass knob. Memories flooded back, of laughter, of running through these halls with Alice, of the last time she saw her sister's smiling face. With a steely resolve, Evelyn turned the knob and pushed the door open. The hinges protested, screeching loudly, as if the house itself were waking from a long slumber. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. Shafts of pale light pierced through the boarded-up windows, casting long shadows that danced across the floor. Evelyn's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a grand foyer that had fallen into disrepair. The once polished marble floors were now cracked and stained, and the sweeping staircase that dominated the room was coated in a thick layer of dust. Evelyn's footsteps echoed as she moved deeper into the house. She passed through the foyer and into a large drawing room. The remnants of a once lavish lifestyle were scattered about, ornate furniture draped in dusty sheets, a grand piano with yellowed keys, and paintings hanging askew on the walls. She paused before one of the paintings, wiping away the grime to reveal a portrait of the Ashcroft family. Their stern faces seemed to watch her, their eyes following her every move. Suddenly, a cold draft brushed past her, carrying with it the faintest whisper of her name. "Evelyn." The sound was barely perceptible, like the rustle of leaves in the wind, but it was enough to make her blood run cold. She spun around, her flashlight beam dancing wildly across the room. But there was nothing there, just the empty, decaying remnants of a bygone era. "Get a grip, Evelyn," she muttered to herself, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "It's just the wind." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Ashcroft Manor was waking up, and it had been waiting for her. She pulled out her digital recorder and began speaking, her voice steady despite the growing unease. "Evelyn Harper, investigation log, day 1. The atmosphere inside Ashcroft Manor is oppressive, the air thick with the scent of decay. Already I'm experiencing unexplained phenomena, a cold draft, whispering voices. This place is very much alive, and it knows I'm here." As she moved through the house, Evelyn documented every detail. The ornate dining room with its long, dust-covered table and overturned chairs. The library where books lay scattered across the floor as if abandoned in a hurry. Every room told a story of sudden departure, of lives interrupted. And everywhere she felt that same cold presence, watching, waiting. In the hallway leading to the second floor, Evelyn paused. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to deepen. She hesitated, then placed her hand on the banister, the wood icy to the touch. Slowly she ascended, each step creaking ominously beneath her weight. At the top of the stairs, the corridor stretched out before her, lined with closed doors. Her heart pounded as she approached the first door on the left. It creaked open with a touch, revealing a child's bedroom frozen in time. Toys lay scattered across the floor, and a small bed sat against the wall, its sheets rumpled as if someone had just risen. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. This was Alice's room. She stepped inside, her flashlight beam illuminating the room in stark, harsh light. The memories came rushing back, nights spent playing, the sound of Alice's laughter. And then, the night she disappeared. The bed was empty, the room silent, but Evelyn felt a presence so strong it was almost tangible. "Evelyn." The whisper came again, more insistent this time. She turned, her flashlight sweeping across the room, but again she was alone. Or was she? The air felt thick, charged with an energy that prickled her skin. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small EMF meter. The device beeped softly, the needle twitching erratically. There was something here, something unseen. She approached the window, peering out at the fog-enshrouded grounds below. The silence was oppressive, the weight of the past pressing down on her. As she turned away, a shadow flickered at the edge of her vision. She froze, staring at the spot where it had appeared, but there was nothing. "Evelyn!" The voice was right behind her now, so close she could feel the breath on her neck. She spun around, her heart pounding, but the room was empty. She backed away, her flashlight shaking in her hand, until she reached the door. She needed to get out, to regroup and reassess. With one last glance at the room, she turned and hurried down the stairs, her mind racing. The house was waking up, and it was only a matter of time before it revealed its darkest secrets. As she stepped outside, the cold air hit her like a wall, but it was a relief compared to the oppressive atmosphere inside. She took a deep breath, the fog swirling around her, and looked back at the mansion. Ashcroft Manor stood silent and foreboding, its secrets still hidden in the shadows. Evelyn knew she had to return, to face whatever lay within those walls. She had come too far to turn back now. But as she walked away, the faint whisper of her name echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder that the house was very much aware of her presence, and it was waiting. Evelyn Harper hesitated on the threshold of Ashcroft Manor, the rusted iron key heavy in her hand. The forest was silent around her, as if holding its breath in anticipation. She glanced at the withered ivy clinging to the mansion's stone walls, its gnarled tendrils resembling skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a fitting prelude to the secrets she was about to unearth. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn inserted the key into the ancient lock. With a grating sound, the door creaked open, revealing a yawning darkness. She stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight as if protesting the intrusion. Her flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, revealing dust motes dancing in the air, undisturbed for decades. The grand foyer of Ashcroft Manor was a testament to its former glory, now shrouded in neglect. Ornate chandeliers hung precariously from the ceiling, their crystals dull and coated in grime. Faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. A grand staircase, its once polished banister now splintered and worn, loomed ahead. Evelyn's footsteps echoed eerily as she crossed the foyer, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Ignoring the unease, she made her way to the drawing room, where she had last seen her sister, Clara, all those years ago. The drawing room was a sepulchre of memories, its heavy drapes drawn tight against the outside world. Evelyn's flashlight played across the room, illuminating an overturned armchair, a broken mirror, and a grand piano with yellowed keys. She could almost hear the faint strains of Clara's playing, a haunting melody that had once filled the house with life. As she approached the piano, Evelyn felt a sudden chill. She paused, her breath visible in the air. The temperature had plummeted, a sure sign of a supernatural presence. Her pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and anticipation. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cold, smooth surface of the piano. A whisper, barely audible, brushed her ear. "Evelyn." She spun around, her flashlight beam darting across the room. Nothing, just shadows and silence. Her heart pounded in her chest, the sound deafening in the quiet. She took a step back, her heel hitting something solid. She turned to see an old leather-bound journal on the floor, its cover embossed with the initials C.H. Clara Harper. Evelyn's hands trembled as she picked up the journal. She had never seen this before. She opened it, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakable, Clara's neat, flowing script. Evelyn's eyes scanned the first few entries, detailing mundane events until she reached the later pages. "Something is wrong in this house. I hear whispers at night, voices that aren't there. The shadows move when they shouldn't. I feel like I'm being watched, followed. I need to find out what's happening here. I need to protect Evelyn." Evelyn's throat tightened. Clara had known something was wrong. She had tried to protect her. But from what? A sudden crash from the hallway jolted Evelyn from her thoughts. She dropped the journal and swung her flashlight towards the sound. The beam illuminated a shattered vase, shards of porcelain scattered across the floor. Her pulse raced as she edged towards the doorway, every sense on high alert. The hallway was a tunnel of darkness, the flashlight revealing glimpses of peeling wallpaper and rotting wood. Evelyn's breath came in short, sharp bursts as she crept forward, her ears straining for any sound. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, the silence almost tangible. Then she heard it, a soft, shuffling sound, like footsteps dragging across the floor. It came from the end of the hallway, near the grand staircase. Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing herself to move towards the noise. The closer she got, the colder the air became, the oppressive chill sinking into her bones. As she reached the base of the staircase, her flashlight flickered, then died. Panic surged through her as she fumbled to turn it back on. In the pitch darkness, the shuffling grew louder, accompanied by a faint, echoing whisper. "Evelyn, help me." Her fingers finally found the switch, and the flashlight blazed to life. She aimed it up the staircase and froze. A figure stood at the top, shrouded in shadow. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its form seemed to waver, as if struggling to maintain its shape. "Evelyn," the figure whispered, its voice a chilling blend of sorrow and malice. Evelyn's breath hitched. "Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure reached out a hand, and for a moment Evelyn thought she saw her sister's face, twisted in anguish. Then the figure dissolved into a cloud of darkness, the shadows retreating into the upper floor with a whispering sigh. Evelyn stood there, her heart hammering in her chest, the flashlight shaking in her hand. She knew now that something terrible had happened to Clara, something tied to the malevolent presence in this house. She had to find out what it was, and she had to confront it, no matter the cost. As she turned to go back to the drawing room, she heard a faint, almost imperceptible whisper behind her. "Evelyn, beware the shadows." The warning sent a shiver down her spine. She hurried back to the drawing room, determined to piece together the clues Clara had left behind. The mansion's secrets were slowly unraveling, but the deeper she delved, the more dangerous the journey became. Evelyn knew she was not alone in Ashcroft Manor. The entity was watching, waiting, and it would stop at nothing to claim her as its next victim. Evelyn shivered as she stepped into the local historian's cluttered office, the musty scent of aged paper and ink assaulting her senses. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light, piercing the grime-coated windows, casting eerie shadows that seemed to writhe and twist of their own accord. The historian, an elderly man with a gaunt face and piercing blue eyes, looked up from his desk, cluttered with old maps and manuscripts. "Ms. Harper, I presume." His voice was gravelly, carrying the weight of untold stories and forgotten secrets. "Yes, that's me," Evelyn replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She forced herself to meet his gaze, steeling herself for the information she desperately sought. He gestured to a chair opposite him. "Please sit. I've gathered what I could about Ashcroft Manor and its sordid past." Evelyn settled into the chair, the leather creaking under her weight. The historian began sifting through a pile of yellowed papers, pulling out a thick, leather-bound tome. He opened it with reverence, the brittle pages crackling as he turned them. "Ashcroft Manor," he began, "was built in the late 1800s by Elias Ashcroft, a wealthy industrialist. From the very beginning, the mansion seemed to be cursed. Elias's wife, Maria, died under mysterious circumstances shortly after they moved in. Rumors spread of strange lights and noises coming from the mansion at night." Evelyn leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "What kind of noises?" "Whispers," the historian said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. And then people started to disappear. Servants, guests, even members of the Ashcroft family. They would vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but whispers in the dark." Evelyn's mind raced, connecting the historian's words with her own experiences in the mansion. The whispers, the shadows. Could it all be tied to these disappearances? The historian continued, "Elias Ashcroft himself disappeared one night, leaving the mansion abandoned. Over the years, several families tried to make it their home, but none lasted long. The whispers drove them away, or worse, they disappeared too." Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white. "And my sister, she disappeared there 20 years ago. Do you know anything about that?" The historian's expression softened with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "Your sister? Yes, I remember reading about her. Emma Harper, correct? She was among the last to vanish. There was an extensive search, but like the others, she left no trace." Evelyn's throat tightened, and she struggled to keep her composure. "Do you have any idea what happened to them? What could be causing these disappearances?" The historian hesitated, then leaned closer, his eyes darkening. "There are legends, Ms. Harper, old legends about a malevolent entity that resides within the mansion. Some say it's the spirit of Elias Ashcroft, twisted by his own grief and madness. Others believe it's something far older and more sinister, a being that feeds on fear and despair." Evelyn's breath hitched as she recalled the shadowy figure she had seen, the cold, mocking whispers that seemed to know her deepest fears. "I've encountered something there, something that seems to enjoy tormenting me with my sister's memory." The historian nodded grimly. "The entity, as it's often called, it's said to be cunning, manipulative, and relentless. It preys on those who enter the mansion, using their fears against them. Many believe it's drawn to those with unresolved trauma, like yourself." Evelyn's resolve hardened. "Then it's time someone put an end to it. How do I stop it?" The historian's eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and admiration. "That, Ms. Harper, is the question. There are stories of rituals and symbols of protection, but none have been verified. The most concrete evidence I've found suggests that understanding the entity's origins might be the key to defeating it." He handed her a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches. This belonged to one of the mansion's former owners, a man named Henry Caldwell. He was obsessed with uncovering the truth about the entity. His notes might provide the answers you seek. Evelyn took the journal with trembling hands, feeling the weight of its contents. "Thank you," she whispered, her determination burning brighter than ever. As she left the historian's office, the fog outside seemed to thicken, wrapping around her like a shroud. The shadows deepened, and the whispers in the wind grew louder, more insistent. Evelyn knew she was walking into the heart of darkness, but she was no longer afraid. She had a purpose, a mission to uncover the truth and put an end to the entity's reign of terror. Little did she know, the entity was already aware of her intentions, and it was waiting, watching, and ready to strike. The real horror had only just begun. The heavy wooden door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with dust-covered relics of the past. Evelyn's flashlight beam danced across the room, revealing scattered papers, ancient furniture, and cobwebs that seemed to sway in the cold drafts. The air was thick with the musty scent of decay, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional groan of the old house settling. Evelyn moved cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. Each step echoed ominously in the vast, empty space. She approached an old writing desk, its surface buried under a thick layer of dust and forgotten memories. Carefully, she brushed away the dust, revealing a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and worn with age. Her hands trembled as she opened the journal, the pages brittle and yellowed. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if the author had been racing against time. The entries detailed the daily life of the Manor's last inhabitant, a man named Edgar Ashcroft. As Evelyn read, a chilling narrative began to unfold. May 13th, 1876. The shadows in the Manor grow darker with each passing night. I hear whispers that I cannot understand, and I feel a presence watching me from the corners of the rooms. I fear I am losing my mind, but I must find a way to uncover the truth. Evelyn's eyes widened. The descriptions mirrored her own experiences, confirming her suspicions about the malevolent force haunting the mansion. She continued to read, absorbing every detail. Edgar had conducted his own investigation, documenting strange symbols and rituals he believed could banish the entity plaguing the manor. June 21st, 1876. I have discovered ancient symbols hidden within the walls of the mansion. They appear to be part of a ritual, one that could potentially trap or weaken the entity. I must proceed with caution. The entity is aware of my actions, and its wrath grows stronger with each passing day. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She needed to find these symbols and perform the ritual if she was to have any hope of defeating the entity. But the journal ended abruptly, leaving her with more questions than answers. What had happened to Edgar? Had he succeeded, or had the entity claimed him as another victim? Determined to uncover the truth, Evelyn continued her search. She explored the room, her flashlight revealing more clues, a map of the mansion with certain rooms marked, old books on occult practices, and scattered notes with sketches of the symbols Edgar had described. Each discovery brought her closer to understanding the nature of the entity and the means to combat it. As she sifted through the papers, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing her flashlight. Darkness enveloped her, and she felt an icy chill creep up her spine. The oppressive silence was shattered by a faint whisper, echoing through the darkness. "Evelyn." Her blood ran cold. The whisper was unmistakably her name, drawn out in a sinister, mocking tone. She fumbled for her flashlight, but it refused to turn on. Panic set in as the whispering grew louder, more insistent. "Evelyn, come to me." Desperation fueled her actions as she reached for the matches she had brought with her. With trembling hands, she struck one, casting a flickering light in the room. Shadows danced on the walls, and in the corner of her eye, she saw it, a dark, shifting form lurking just beyond the reach of the light. Summoning all her courage, Evelyn forced herself to speak. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The entity's voice echoed through the room, a chilling blend of malice and sorrow. "I am the darkness that binds this place. I feed on fear, on despair. You are mine, Evelyn." She took a step back, her mind racing. She couldn't let the entity consume her. She had to stay focused, to remember why she was here. "You won't take me. I know what you are, and I will stop you." The entity's laughter filled the room, a sound that chilled her to the bone. "Many have tried, and all have failed. You are no different." Evelyn's resolve hardened. She was not alone in this fight. She had Edgar's research, her own determination, and the memory of her sister driving her forward. She reignited the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, and hurried out of the room, the entity's whispers following her. She navigated the winding corridors of the mansion, following the map she had found. Each step brought her closer to the rooms marked with the symbols Edgar had discovered. The entity's presence was a constant, oppressive force, but she pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear and determination. In one of the marked rooms, she found the first symbol etched into the floor, a complex, intricate design that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Evelyn took out her camera and snapped a picture, then copied the symbol into her notebook. She had to gather all the symbols to complete the ritual. Hours passed as she moved from room to room, the mansion's dark secrets slowly unraveling before her. Each symbol she found seemed to weaken the entity's hold on her, but it also grew more desperate, its whispers more frantic, its attempts to frighten her more intense. As she entered the final room, Evelyn felt a surge of hope. The last symbol was there, carved into the wall with a precision that spoke of Edgar's dedication. She copied it down, feeling the weight of her task pressing on her shoulders. She had all the pieces, now she just had to perform the ritual. But the entity was not ready to let her go. As she turned to leave, the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. The temperature dropped, and the room was plunged into darkness. The entity's voice filled the space, a cacophony of anger and despair. "You cannot escape me, Evelyn. You will join the others." Fear gripped her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had come too far to give up now. With steady hands, she began to draw the symbols on the floor, arranging them in the pattern described in Edgar's notes. The entity's presence pressed down on her, but she pushed through, completing the ritual. As she finished the last symbol, a blinding light filled the room, and the entity let out a deafening scream. The oppressive darkness lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and peace. Evelyn collapsed to the floor, exhausted but victorious. She had done it. She had uncovered the truth, faced her fears, and defeated the entity. As she made her way out of the mansion, she felt a sense of closure she hadn't known in years. Her sister's memory was honored, and she had found a new purpose. But as she stepped outside, a faint whisper echoed in the wind, reminding her that some darkness could never be fully vanquished. Evelyn's flashlight beam cut through the oppressive darkness of Ashcroft Manor's basement, the shadows flickering against the damp stone walls like restless spirits. The air grew colder as she descended, each step echoing in the silence. Her breath fogged in front of her, mingling with the musty scent of decay and something far more ancient and malevolent. She felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her, a creeping dread curling around her heart. The stairs ended abruptly, opening into a narrow corridor lined with faded portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. Evelyn steeled herself, remembering why she was here. This was for her sister, for answers, for closure. She reached the end of the corridor and faced a heavy wooden door, its surface scarred and blackened as if it had been burned. With trembling hands, she pushed it open, the creak of the hinges reverberating like a scream. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the rest of the manor, meticulously preserved, as if time itself feared to touch it. At the center stood a large stone altar, covered in strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light. Candles flickered around the perimeter, casting eerie shadows that danced like malevolent spirits. Evelyn felt a presence, an overwhelming sense of dread that settled in her bones. The entity was here, lurking just beyond the veil of the visible world. She took a cautious step forward, her flashlight illuminating a series of ancient texts and artifacts scattered across the altar. Among them she found her sister's journal, the pages worn and stained with age. Her heart pounded as she flipped through it, the words revealing the horror her sister had faced. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted. Evelyn's breath came in ragged gasps, and her flashlight flickered and died. In the suffocating darkness, she heard it. A whisper, barely audible but filled with malice. "Evelyn." She spun around, her eyes straining to see. The shadows coalesced, forming a dark figure that seemed to absorb the light. The entity. It moved closer, its form shifting and undulating like smoke. Evelyn felt a cold, clammy hand brush against her cheek, and she recoiled in terror. "Your sister! She tried to save you!" the entity hissed, its voice a cacophony of tortured souls. "She failed. You will too." "No!" Evelyn shouted, the word echoing in the chamber. She felt a surge of anger and defiance. "I won't let you win!" The entity laughed, a sound that chilled her to the core. It surged forward, enveloping her in darkness. Memories flashed before her eyes. Her sister's laughter, their childhood games, the day she disappeared. The entity was in her mind, twisting her memories into nightmares. Evelyn fought back, focusing on her sister's journal. She remembered the ritual described in its pages, a way to weaken the entity. She recited the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. The shadows writhed in agony, the entity's form becoming less distinct. "Stop!" it screamed, its voice now filled with fear. "You cannot defeat me!" Evelyn continued, her determination unwavering. The symbols on the altar began to glow, casting a harsh light that burned the entity's dark form. The whispers turned to screams, and the shadows retreated, shrinking away from the light. With a final desperate cry, the entity dissipated, leaving the chamber eerily silent. Evelyn collapsed to her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion. She clutched her sister's journal to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had faced the entity and survived, but she knew it wasn't over. The entity was weakened, not destroyed. It would return, and she needed to be ready. As she made her way out of the chamber, Evelyn felt a strange sense of peace. She had confronted her deepest fears and found the strength to fight back. For her sister, for herself, and for all the lost souls still trapped in Ashcroft Manor. Emerging into the cool night air, she looked back at the mansion one last time. The darkness seemed less oppressive now, the shadows less menacing. She knew her journey was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever came next. The faint whisper of her sister's voice lingered in her mind, a reminder that she was not alone. Evelyn Harper, paranormal investigator, had found her purpose, and she would not stop until the entity was vanquished for good. Evelyn stood in the heart of Ashcroft Manor, her breath shallow and her heart pounding against her ribcage like a frantic drum. The hidden chamber, which she had painstakingly unearthed, was cloaked in darkness save for the faint glow of her flashlight, casting long, flickering shadows on the stone walls. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and the whisper of ancient, forgotten secrets. She steeled herself, clutching the leather-bound journal she had discovered in one of the manor's upper rooms. Its brittle pages contained hastily scrawled notes, diagrams, and an intricate ritual designed to weaken the entity that had claimed her sister, and so many others. Evelyn's fingers traced the words, feeling a connection to her sister, whose final acts of defiance had been recorded here. A sudden chill swept through the chamber, extinguishing her flashlight. Evelyn cursed under her breath, fumbling to relight it, but the batteries had died. The darkness pressed in, a tangible force, and the whispers began anew, insidious, mocking. "Evelyn, you can't save her. You can't save yourself." The voice was a sibilant hiss, echoing off the walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing down the rising tide of panic. She had come too far to falter now. Her sister's voice, a memory from long ago, echoed in her mind. "Be brave, Evie. Fear is just a shadow." Determined, she reached into her bag, pulling out a bundle of candles and a box of matches. Striking a match, she lit the candles one by one, their feeble flames casting a dim but steady light. She arranged them in a circle on the dusty floor, just as the journal instructed. In the center she placed a small, ornate mirror she had found in the attic, another relic mentioned in the ritual. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. The shadows at the edge of the candlelight seemed to writhe and twist, as if alive. Evelyn began to chant, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Ancient spirits, hear my plea. Unveil the darkness, set souls free. By this light and mirror's grace, banish shadows from this place." The temperature plummeted, her breath visible in the air as frost began to creep across the stone floor. The shadows coalesced into a single towering form, a dark, shapeless mass with glowing, malevolent eyes. "You dare challenge me?" The entity's voice was a guttural growl, reverberating through the chamber. "You are nothing, just like your sister." Evelyn's grip tightened on the journal. "My sister was brave. She fought you, and so will I." The entity lashed out, a tendril of darkness snuffing out one of the candles. Evelyn staggered but regained her footing, continuing the chant with renewed fervor. She could feel the entity's fury, its desperation to break her spirit, but she would not yield. As she chanted, the mirror in the center of the circle began to glow, reflecting the candlelight with an otherworldly brilliance. The entity recoiled, its form distorting and shrinking away from the light. "Ancient spirits, heed my call. Break this darkness. End it all." The ground beneath her feet trembled, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. The entity's form writhed in agony, its shadowy tendrils retreating from the light. Evelyn continued to chant, her voice unwavering. With a final ear-splitting shriek, the entity's form shattered, dissolving into nothingness. The oppressive darkness lifted, leaving only the flickering candlelight and the faint, echoing whispers of those who had been trapped. Evelyn fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The air was still, the heavy weight of malevolence gone. She took a moment to catch her breath, her heart gradually slowing to a more steady rhythm. She reached for the journal, her fingers brushing against the pages. A tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered, "I did it, sis. I found you." The manor seemed to sigh, its ancient walls releasing a breath it had held for decades. Evelyn extinguished the candles and gathered her things, knowing she could not linger. As she made her way back through the darkened halls, she felt a sense of peace and closure she had not known in years. The front door groaned open, and she stepped out into the cool night air. The manor loomed behind her, its shadows less threatening, more like old ghosts finally laid to rest. Evelyn glanced back one last time, a faint smile on her lips. As she walked away, the whispering shadows faded, leaving only silence and the promise of dawn. Evelyn Harper stumbled out of the collapsing mansion, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The once formidable Ashcroft Manor was now a crumbling ruin, the malevolent force that had haunted it for decades weakened but not entirely vanquished. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning wood. Evelyn could hear the distant wail of sirens, but they felt like a world away. She sank to her knees on the damp, overgrown lawn, clutching the journal that had once belonged to her sister. Tears streamed down her face, not just from the physical pain, but from the emotional toll of confronting the entity and the truth about her sister's fate. Her sister Lily had been so close to uncovering the dark secrets of the manor before she had fallen victim to the entity. Now, with the knowledge Lily had left behind, Evelyn had managed to perform the ritual that weakened the malevolent spirit, at least for now. The memories of the confrontation in the hidden chamber replayed in her mind. The entity's whispers had grown louder, more insistent, as it fed on her fear and despair. It had taunted her with visions of Lily's final moments, trying to break her resolve. But Evelyn had found strength in those very memories, using her sister's courage to fuel her own. As she sat on the cold ground, Evelyn's mind began to clear. She knew she needed to process everything that had happened. The truth about Lily's fate was heartbreaking, but it also brought a strange sense of closure. Her sister had fought bravely, leaving behind crucial clues that ultimately helped Evelyn to confront the entity. Lily's spirit had not been in vain. She had played a crucial role in weakening the darkness that lurked within Ashcroft Manor. Evelyn's body ached from the physical and emotional strain, but she forced herself to stand. She needed to see the aftermath of the battle with her own eyes. The mansion, once an imposing structure of Gothic architecture, was now a smoldering ruin. The ancient bricks and rotting wood lay in heaps, the windows shattered, the roof caved in. The oppressive aura that had surrounded the place seemed to have lifted slightly, but there was still a lingering sense of unease. She walked slowly around the perimeter of the mansion, her flashlight cutting through the smoke and darkness. The local authorities had arrived, but they kept their distance, wary of the paranormal investigator who had ventured into the haunted house alone. Evelyn didn't care about their stares or whispers. Her mind was focused on what she had to do next. In the dim light of dawn, Evelyn approached the place where the hidden chamber had been. The ground was disturbed, the earth churned up as if something had tried to claw its way out. She knew that the entity was not completely gone. Weakened, yes, but it still lurked in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Evelyn made a silent vow to keep fighting, to ensure that the entity could never harm anyone again. Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle touch on her shoulder. She turned to see a familiar face, Tom, a fellow investigator, and one of her closest friends. His expression was a mix of concern and relief. "You did it," he said softly. "You found out what happened to Lily." Evelyn nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The weight of the past night's events hung heavy in the air. "I did, but it's not over. The entity is still out there, weakened but not defeated." Tom's eyes darkened with understanding. "Then we'll keep fighting. Together." Evelyn managed a small, weary smile. She knew she couldn't do this alone. With Tom and the others by her side, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would continue their work, delving into the unknown and confronting the darkness wherever it hid. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the ruins of Ashcroft Manor, Evelyn felt a strange sense of peace. She had faced her deepest fears, uncovered the truth about her sister, and struck a blow against the malevolent force that had haunted her for so long. There was still much work to be done, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. She turned to leave, taking one last look at the mansion that had been the source of so much pain and suffering. In the stillness of the early morning, she could almost hear a faint whisper, a lingering echo of the entity's presence. But instead of fear, Evelyn felt a surge of determination. She would not rest until the shadows were banished for good. Evelyn walked away from Ashcroft Manor, her steps firm and resolute. She carried with her the memories of her sister, the lessons of the past, and the strength to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The battle was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Evelyn Harper stood at the edge of the desolate clearing, Ashcroft Manor's smoldering ruins behind her. The air was thick with the acrid scent of charred wood and ancient dust, mingling with the faint musty odor of decaying leaves. The sun struggled to break through the heavy, oppressive clouds, casting an eerie, pallid light over the scene. She had survived. The entity was vanquished, or so it seemed. Evelyn's heart still pounded with the echo of her escape, each beat a reminder of the terror she had faced and the strength she had found within herself. The hidden chamber, the ritual, her sister's ghostly guidance, all had led to this moment. Yet an unsettling unease lingered, refusing to dissipate like the morning mist. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The weight of her sister's fate and the countless others who had fallen victim to the entity pressed heavily on her mind. She glanced back at the blackened husk of the mansion, memories of its shadowed corridors and malevolent whispers flashing in her mind. Despite the destruction, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ashcroft Manor's malevolence hadn't been entirely eradicated. The town below was waking up, unaware of the nightmarish battle that had taken place. Evelyn knew she couldn't explain the true horrors of the mansion to them. They would never believe her. To them, she was just a determined woman seeking closure for her sister's tragic disappearance. She turned away from the ruins, her footsteps crunching on the gravel path leading back to her car. The early morning light cast long shadows, and the dense forest seemed to watch her, the trees whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves set her on edge. Evelyn's senses were heightened, her mind still tuned to the mansion's oppressive atmosphere. As she reached her car, she paused, her hand on the door handle. A chill ran down her spine, and she turned slowly, scanning the forest's edge. The world was still, unnaturally so. Her breath caught as she heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Evelyn. The voice was soft, almost caressing, and filled with an insidious familiarity. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She strained to listen, her pulse quickening. Had it been real? Or was it just her imagination, tainted by the horrors she had endured? Evelyn. There it was again, clearer this time, drifting on the breeze like a ghostly lament. She turned in a slow circle, eyes wide, searching the shadows for any sign of movement. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Fear clawed at her, but she forced herself to remain calm, to think rationally. "It's over," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "It's over." Yet deep down she knew the truth. The entity's presence was not entirely gone. It had left a part of itself behind, a dark echo that would haunt her forever. Evelyn's resolve hardened. She could not let fear control her. She had faced the entity and survived. She could handle whatever remnants it left behind. She took a final sweeping glance at the forest, the mansion's ruins just visible through the trees. The whispering ceased, leaving a heavy, foreboding silence in its wake. Evelyn knew she had to leave this place, but the battle against the darkness was far from over. Evelyn got into her car and started the engine. As she drove away from Ashcroft Manor, the road winding through the fog-shrouded woods, she felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. The entity had been weakened, but its malevolent spirit lingered, a testament to the horrors that had transpired within those walls. She drove in silence, the radio off, the only sound the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the tires on the road. The landscape blurred past, but her mind was sharp, focused. She would continue her work, not just for her sister, but for all those who had fallen victim to the dark forces she now knew existed. The world was full of shadows, and she was determined to shine a light on them. As she crossed the town's border, the whisper came again, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind that rustled through the trees. "Evelyn!" She didn't flinch this time. Instead, she set her jaw, her eyes narrowing with determination. The entity might still have a hold on her, but she would not let it win. She had faced her deepest fears and come out stronger. Whatever lay ahead, she would be ready. The road stretched out before her, a path into the unknown. Evelyn Harper drove on, the lingering whisper a reminder of the battles she had fought and the strength she had gained. She was no longer just a seeker of the paranormal. She was a warrior against the darkness, ready to face whatever horrors the future might hold. Evelyn Harper stood at the edge of the ruins of Ashcroft Manor, the morning sun casting long, eerie shadows over the charred remains. The mansion, once a towering edifice of dread, now lay in smoldering heaps, a testament to the horror that had been vanquished, or so she hoped. Her breath was visible in the crisp air, mingling with the last wisps of smoke. She had survived the night, but the shadows still lingered in her mind, whispering secrets she was not sure she wanted to hear. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and burned wood, and the silence was profound, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for something. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, the echoes of her confrontation with the entity still reverberating in her mind. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, each step she took through the debris laden with memories and unanswered questions. As she sifted through the ruins, her eyes caught a glint of metal amidst the ashes. She knelt down, brushing away the soot to reveal an old, ornate locket. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, revealing a faded photograph of her sister Sarah, smiling back at her. The sight was a dagger to her heart, sharp and unrelenting. She closed her eyes, memories flooding back, laughter, whispered secrets, the night Sarah disappeared. A sudden rustle in the underbrush snapped Evelyn back to the present. Her head whipped around, every sense on high alert. The forest surrounding the manor was unnaturally still, the trees standing like silent sentinels, their branches intertwined in a grotesque mockery of life. She strained to hear, but there was nothing, no birds, no insects, just the deafening silence. Evelyn rose to her feet, her pulse quickening. She knew better than to dismiss the feeling of being watched. The entity was cunning, its whispers insidious. She had weakened it, but had she truly destroyed it? The doubt gnawed at her, a relentless specter haunting her thoughts. She ventured deeper into the forest, the locket clutched tightly in her hand. Each step was a struggle against the creeping dread that threatened to consume her. The trees closed in around her, the shadows deepening, and the path became a twisted maze. She stumbled upon an old, forgotten trail, overgrown with thorny vines and littered with decaying leaves. As she pushed through the underbrush, the whispers began again, soft, almost imperceptible at first, then growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding her, invading her mind. "Evelyn, come back. Join us." She stopped, her heart racing. "No," she whispered fiercely, her voice trembling. "You won't take me. I won't let you." Her defiance echoed in the stillness, a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. The whispers paused, as if considering her resolve. Then a chilling laughter filled the air, a sound that made her blood run cold. "You think you can escape, Evelyn? This place is a part of you, just as you are a part of it." Evelyn's grip tightened on the locket. She could feel the entity's presence, a malevolent force pressing in on her, feeding on her fear. But she would not let it win. Not now, not ever. She took a deep breath, drawing strength from the memory of her sister. Sarah had faced this darkness alone. Now it was Evelyn's turn to end it. She moved forward with renewed determination, following the trail deeper into the heart of the forest. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own. She came upon a clearing, and in the center stood an ancient, gnarled tree. Its twisted branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and at its base was a small, unmarked grave. Evelyn knelt beside the grave, her heart heavy with sorrow and resolve. "This is where it ends," she murmured, placing the locket on the grave. "For Sarah, and for everyone you've taken." The wind picked up, swirling around her in a frenzy. The whispers turned to screams, the shadows writhing and twisting in agony. Evelyn stood her ground, her eyes fixed on the grave. She could feel the entity's rage, its desperation, but she knew it was weakening. She had faced her fears, confronted the darkness, and now it was time to let go. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the screams faded, the shadows receded, and the forest fell silent once more. Evelyn stood alone in the clearing, the locket gleaming softly in the early morning light. She felt a profound sense of peace, a weight lifted from her soul. The entity was gone, its hold on Ashcroft Manor broken. Evelyn turned and walked away, the whispers finally silenced. She had faced the shadows and emerged victorious. But as she left the forest behind, a faint whisper carried on the breeze, a reminder that some echoes of the past never truly fade. The wind howled through the skeletal trees as Evelyn Harper stood at the edge of the forest, her eyes locked onto the distant silhouette of Ashcroft Manor. It had been weeks since she last set foot in that cursed place, but the memories were as vivid as if it had all happened yesterday. The collapsing mansion, the malevolent entity, the whispers that gnawed at her sanity. Everything was etched into her mind with a clarity that refused to fade. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the leather-bound journal she had discovered in the mansion's hidden chamber. Her sister's final words were scrawled across the pages, a desperate plea for help and a guide to confronting the entity. Evelyn had followed the instructions to the letter, performing the ritual that weakened the entity and allowed her to escape. Yet, despite her victory, a gnawing doubt lingered in her heart. Was the entity truly vanquished? She had to know. The whispers in the wind, faint but persistent, had been calling to her ever since she left the manor. Tonight she would return, not as a victim seeking closure, but as a warrior armed with knowledge and determination. The forest seemed to close in around her as she walked the familiar path to Ashcroft Manor. Fog curled around her ankles, and shadows danced in the periphery of her vision. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent a shiver down her spine. But Evelyn pressed on, driven by a force stronger than fear, resolve. As she approached the mansion's entrance, the oppressive silence was broken only by the creaking of the decaying wood beneath her feet. She stepped inside, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The air was cold, and the scent of mold and decay clung to her nostrils. She moved with cautious precision, her senses heightened, every nerve on edge. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of shadows and memories. Evelyn's flashlight flickered over familiar landmarks, the grand staircase, the shattered chandelier, the portraits of long-dead Ashcroft ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. She navigated the hallways with a mix of trepidation and determination, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the door to the hidden chamber, the place where she had confronted the entity. The door, once sealed tight, now hung ajar, as if beckoning her to enter. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped inside. The chamber was as she remembered it, an ancient room shrouded in darkness, its walls lined with arcane symbols and ritualistic artifacts. Her flashlight's beam illuminated the center of the room, where the remnants of the ritual lay scattered on the floor. But something was different. The air was thicker, more charged, and the whispers were louder, more insistent. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she scanned the room. She knew the entity was still here, lurking, waiting. She could feel its presence, a malevolent force that thrived on fear and despair. Her grip tightened on the journal as she stepped further into the chamber. Evelyn. The whisper was a cold breath against her ear, sending a chill down her spine. She turned sharply, but there was nothing there. Just shadows and darkness. She steeled herself, remembering her sister's words. Fear is its weapon. Do not let it consume you. She moved to the center of the room and began to recite the incantation from the journal, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The air grew colder, the whispers more frantic. Shadows swirled around her, taking on shapes that clawed at the edges of her sanity. She forced herself to focus, to drown out the entity's attempts to break her resolve. The final words of the incantation left her lips, and for a moment there was silence. Then a low, guttural growl echoed through the chamber, and the shadows converged into a single writhing mass. The entity emerged, a formless void of darkness, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly malevolence. "You cannot defeat me," it hissed, its voice a cacophony of torment. "I am eternal. I am despair." Evelyn stood her ground, her heart hammering in her chest. "You may be eternal," she said, her voice unwavering, "but so is hope, and I will not let you take that away." She reached into her bag and pulled out the last item her sister had left her, a small ornate mirror. The entity recoiled, its form flickering as if in pain. Evelyn held the mirror up, the reflective surface catching the light from her flashlight and casting it into the entity's core. A piercing scream filled the chamber as the entity writhed and twisted, its form disintegrating into tendrils of smoke and shadow. Evelyn held the mirror steady, her eyes fixed on the entity as it was drawn into the reflective surface, its screams fading into a distant echo. The room fell silent, the air returning to a semblance of normalcy. Evelyn lowered the mirror, her hands shaking. She had done it. The entity was trapped, its power broken. As she left the hidden chamber, a sense of peace washed over her. The whispers in the wind had ceased, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves. She stepped out of Ashcroft Manor and into the cool night air, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Evelyn Harper walked away from the mansion, the journal and mirror safely tucked in her bag. She had faced her fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged victorious. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer a prisoner of the past. She was a survivor, a warrior, and she would continue to fight, armed with the knowledge that hope could conquer even the deepest despair. As the first light of dawn began to break through the trees, Evelyn took one last look at Ashcroft Manor. The silhouette of the mansion stood silent, its shadows no longer whispering of despair, but of the strength and courage of those who had faced the darkness and won.